Everyone, welcome. I'm Rachel Siegel, the Director of Strategic Programs at Illuminate. Welcome to our Crown Jewel Conversation Series. Illuminate is a catalyst for social change for women's advancement, equity, and justice. We have created the collective to strengthen and advance Jewish women's leadership globally through the creation of a transformative network to achieve social change that we seek. Illuminate invests in Jewish entrepreneurial women executives and leaders, who we call Jewels, who are devoting their lives to tackling society's most pressing issues in the United States, Israel, and around the globe. Each year, we select 10 women to be in the collective's cohort-based leadership advancement program, which fosters connections, encourages partnerships, provides resources, and a curriculum tailored to meet their needs. Our global network is now 50 women strong. Our conversation features one of our incredible jewels. SooJi Min-Maranda is the Executive Director of Aleph, Alliance for Jewish Renewal. Her previous roles include the Executive Director of Temple Beth Emet in Ann Arbor, Michigan, the Illinois Caucus for Adolescent Health, and Korean American Community Services. SooJi's awards include the Asian Health Coalition of Illinois' Outstanding Community Health Advocate Award and the Chicago Foundation for Women's Impact Award. She was a member of Leading Edge's CEO Onboarding Program and the Sella Leadership Program's National Executive Cohort. Please write any questions you have in the chat, and we will do our best to incorporate them if time allows. To begin the conversation, I'm pleased to introduce our immediate past president, Rachel Weinstein.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And hello, everyone, and welcome, SooJi. I'm really so excited to have this conversation with you because, we've known each other for such a long time, and we've talked about renewal, but I myself know that I would appreciate a better understanding of it and of your work. So I'm going to dive right in. We usually like to begin these conversations a little bit about learning more about you and your own personal story, and also how being a Jewish woman of color has shaped that experience and led to the work that you're doing today.
Yeah, so good afternoon. Hi, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. My Jewish journey started actually as an adult. So I converted to Judaism in my early 30s, and I had been then I subsequently married somebody who wasn't Jewish, I guess like a good Jew, and then I had kids, and so all these things, fast forward, made me think about how to be more Jewish. And align, I guess, my reasons for converting, which were rooted in, moral and ethical foundational reasons, right? So when I converted to Judaism, it wasn't like I had to convince myself or believe in anything different. Like I believed, this is a life only life that we have. The sense of urgency that I needed to make the most, each and every day of the life that I've been given, and to make a difference, right? So I was running secular nonprofits, and so I decided to transfer over into Jewish nonprofits. And when I first, actually made that transition, it was hard. It was really, really hard. This was in 2010 because, as a convert, as an immigrant, as a woman of color, somebody married to non-Jewish, there were just too many boxes where people were like, "Who are you? Why are you here?" And I didn't have, the credentials of going to summer camp, running a JCC, running a federation, or even working in any of those places. I actually didn't realize and know that there's a parallel universe. There's a Jewish nonprofit industrial complex that mirrors the secular one, right? So I say that jokingly, not jokingly. So I am in a place now today where I'm actually living, and doing Jewish, right? So both in my own life and in my work, and it's been more than I ever expected, and continuing.
I love what you say about how, this urgency about how you wanted to live your life, and Judaism was sort of like the guide for you. And then, you know, how unfortunate that you who choosing this so passionately come up against all of those barriers. Um, and and I think as we talk about renewal Judaism, people are going to understand why this is where you have landed. So before we get into exactly what the work of Aleph is, can you define renewal Judaism for us?
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit about why it was created and how it fits into the other denominations?
Absolutely. So I guess I'm going to try not to say what it isn't, because that tends to be, I guess, the default. And so I will actually start by saying what it is, right? So renewal is an approach to Judaism. So it is the both and. It is all about co-creation and enlivening Judaism. So what renewal is actually depends on who you're talking to. It depends on what each person brings to the table, to the experience. And it's something where Reb Zalman Schachter Shlomi, rooted in a tradition. So it's, in halakha, in text, in wisdom, and then developed this 4 worlds framework, which is the emotional, the mental, the spiritual, and the physical, right? So 4 worlds framework, and that's sort of how we structure and it's our approach, to the work that we do. And it's enlivening, right? So renewal is actually best experienced in person, which is ironic because we have a seminary which has been online since its inception, and we have a fully remote staff that's been remote since 2018, the fall of 2018. So I say that, and the reason that we can do that, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, is because there's so much energy that we generate, that it's sustained, that we generate and receive and hold and store the times we are together, that it lasts for years, right? That reserve of energy, that ruach. We're extraordinarily spiritual, and about transformation of the self, right? And so it is unlike anything else. I think it's one of Judaism's best kept secrets, right? So we're not a denomination. So I'm going to go actually into what we're not, right? We're not a denomination. We are trans-denominational. We've got people, all across the spectrum, and it is, again, there's, I guess, a requirement that you also participate, right? So there's an ask from renewal that you don't just sit there and receive. You contribute, you engage, you experiment, and you take risks.
So in a way, it layers on to any denomination.
Absolutely.
And it's sort of disrupting the possibly the rote nature of what a traditional service may have looked like. Would that be fair to say?
That's right. No, absolutely. And there are things actually, because again, along the lines of Judaism's best kept secret, if I get another email from one of our constituents who talks about an article that was published, in JTA or in the forward that fails to mention renewal, right? Well, which happens less so than in the past. I'm going to pull my hair out, but it's because there hasn't been a lot of acknowledgement, right, of renewal's contributions, right, in terms of the davening, the drumming, the music, the ecstatic, enlivening of services in particular that have happened. And it's because we don't own it, right? And if anything, we own it together, right? Again, it's that co-creation and the spirit of, trying it on, and doing it yourself kind of thing. Renewal was started by lots of people who felt that they didn't belong in traditional settings. And so they went and created it themselves.
Yeah. I imagine that many people, not only those who are involved with Aleph, but many people on this call today have experienced renewal Judaism and don't know it, right? When shuls come up with, Friday Night Lives and there's a lot of me and all of that, I imagine we have, and maybe we'll get into some specifics about what that is so that people can really tangibly understand it. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about Aleph's work. What exactly is your work? What's your mission? What are some of your programs? What are you doing?
Absolutely. So thank you so much for asking. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm actually going to share with you for the public consumption, our newly revised vision and mission. And not to get everyone too excited, but when I was reading this actually in a committee meeting recently, somebody wrote back and said that they got chills. So that's the high bar that I'm setting for this. So I'll read them both, and I'm going to share my screen. All right. So the vision of Aleph. So Aleph Alliance for Jewish Renewal envisions a contemporary Judaism that is joyous, creative, spiritually rich, socially progressive, and earth aware. This vision arises out of our search for a renewed personal connection to the God of our ancestors and the legacy of our tradition in service of our higher dreams to heal ourselves and our world by promoting justice, freedom, caring for all life, and the earth that sustains all life. And I'm going to share our mission. So Aleph Alliance for Jewish Renewal's mission is to build a global movement that catalyzes spiritual development through a contemporary egalitarian Judaism as a profound spiritual practice and social transformer by reaching beyond religious boundaries and institutional structures while fully embracing and integrating justice, diversity, equity, and belonging. So what do you think, right?
I have chills.
I think it's pretty great.
Yeah, it is pretty great. It is pretty great. How does this manifest in terms of, how are you achieving these goals?
Great question. So, so our board has been very, very busy doing what boards should do, which means setting strategic priorities. And then I'm going to actually share quickly our priorities. And then I'll sort of talk about how then we implement them. So we've set 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 strategic priorities, emphasizing spiritual development and embracing a culture of experimentation and learning, which also allows room for failure, establish financial sustainability, which is no surprise, expand renewal's connective tissue, establish pathways for new leadership and teachers, and then finally ensure the legacy of Reb Zalman and the teachings of other Jewish renewal founders. And how we do that are in a couple main ways. So we have a seminary, right? We have one of the leading liberal seminaries in the United States, and we've been around for more than 20 years. We have 80 current students, 216 ordainees, and it's going strong. Actually, where other universities or seminaries are actually declining, closing shop. For example, we have been very steady for the past 5 years and getting stronger. We have 50 affiliated communities. So we have, in that sense, we're a little bit similar to other denominations or movements. The communities are, again, of all shapes and sizes. Our flagship communities, for those of you who may know or live in these places, is actually Kahila, which is in Piedmont, North Bay, Northern Oakland, California, Romemu, right, which has New York City and Brooklyn, and then Tau Adith Or in South Florida. And so those are probably our sort of, flagship renewal organizations. And what's interesting is that they are also their renewal, and in the for example, the one Kahila, they're reconstructionist and renewal. So it isn't, again, we also have members who are renewal and other things, or just renewal, right? Again, people are allowed to self-define and to co-create at every step of the way. And again, similarly, the affiliates comes in all shapes, stripes, sizes. We also do a huge kala every other year, and I just went on a site visit for our next kala, and I can't tell you where I went. It's top secret. We're not sure if we're going to go there yet, but we're on the search. That'll be in 2025, and it's even a week-long celebration with programming, again, enough for for 3 years of programming crammed into 1 week. We do services 4 times a day. We have 4-day classes. We have one-day classes. It's just the amount of programming is breathtaking. Like, I get breathless just thinking about it and talking about it. And we also have I'll talk a little bit of how we structure. So we have project directors, and this is part of the co-creation, who do other things, but they have an idea or a specific passion that really aligns with renewal. Rabbi Shefa Gold, Rabbi Natan Margalit. We have people that have brought their projects to us, and we do the back office. So we do the registration, the marketing, all of those things, and then we enable our creative folks to do what they do best and shine. When I think about our programs, which are, again, in person and online, I like to liken it to off-Broadway, meaning that it's a little rough around the edges. It's a little bit like do-it-yourself ragtag, and it's about experimentation, right? And that permission to fail. So it's for people who want to try on a new idea that, and we have an audience. We have, a mailing list of 10,000 people that are ready and ripe and willing to go in with you, and to try it on together.
You picked a good analogy for me as a woman who works in theater. So in a way, are you creating programs that then are shared with all the different communities? So like, it's not like creating curriculum, but it's creating practice or educate,
Yes.
or whatever it is.
So I mean, I guess I can answer that in two ways. And so like, when we are in person at the CLA, for example, the teachers are, and the services that people are sharing with each other, and there are teachers who are taking classes as well, that there are only a certain number of teachers, for example, and it's about refilling, right, your own creative juices, filling up that tank. It's an energy that's created together, and then our communities also learn from each other, so they're sharing of resources, because we're an affiliation of folks who don't want to belong to anything. I mean, even more so than any other group, because people are, it's interesting because as I mentioned, I'm an immigrant, and I come from a family of my parents are both passed away, but they were small business owners. Greengrocers is the closest example for New Yorkers out there, and own dry cleaners or whatever. But it was this social entrepreneurship, right? So, which for me, which I love about the work that I do, because you can make it up as you go. You can try it out, and there's no one way to do anything, right? So there is some sharing resources, but at the same time, like I said about Judaism and my own personal story, it's really hard to be Jewish alone. It's a communal by nature. Everything that we do together, right? And you need 10 people before you can actually do anything official. So it really does align well, in terms of that social entrepreneurship that I guess seems to run in my blood.
And just a clarifying question from what you said before, when you talked about, running a seminary, are people being ordained?
That's right. Yeah. So we're ordained and trained, and rabbis, cantors, rabbinic pastors who are like chaplains. And that's actually something, rabbinic pastors were something that Reb Zalman developed and created. And then we also certify spiritual directors.
Interesting. So great. I also want to circle back to something you said before, because you're a national organization, but you've been working virtually since well before it was the norm during the pandemic. So how do you go about creating culture and community with that kind of structure?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, I mean, one answer is that we are a very small but mighty staff. So the core staff is small. We get together at least once a quarter, that we are together for these big events. There's an annual conference for all renewal clergy in January in Denver that we're at every year. And then we have that big scale Kala every other year. And then we meet in person in groups, again, once a quarter. But I think what characterizes the difference is that when we are together, we go deep. Right. And meaning that, again, we do things in the four worlds. So we're thinking about how are we feeling? How are we doing? How's our soul feeling? Right. What's arising right now in our souls and not just our minds. And I think it translates into our staff meetings, which we also are virtual in the times that we're not together. And for example, we have developed a level of trust and rapport that oftentimes when new staff come on, they're like, oh my God, I've never been to a staff meeting like this where people actually talk about how they're feeling, right? And how they're doing, what they're holding in that particular moment in time, right? And that's in good times. And then most recently, we actually had a staff meeting where we had an opportunity just to share about how we were being directly impacted by what happened in October 7th, right? We went around and really the majority of our time was spent listening and witnessing each other. And people responded. It was like, how great does it feel that we were able to do that and model that, as a staff, and also feel safe enough to do so. Because we don't all agree. We have very divergent opinions and views.
Yeah. It's a perfect segue into where I wanted to go next, because obviously I think all Jews have been impacted by October 7th, and all Jewish organizations, whether they're working in Israel or not. So what has that been like for Olive? I mean, obviously there's the personal element of how you and your staff feels, but as a Jewish organization who doesn't work specifically in Israel, how have those events still impacted your organization?
So we, are very fortunate enough that we are partners with the Progressive. We're a member of the Progressive Israel Network. And that actually, again, it's hard to do things alone. So that gives us a community, a framework within which to work that aligns with our values. And I mentioned values. I'm going to share this again. One last thing that I'll share on the screen is this. Hold on, I'll find Principle 16. So when I first joined.
Oh, SooJi, we lost you. I think you may have come unhooked or something. We just lost your sound.
Hey, you okay?
Yep, we hear you now. Yep.
So when I first joined Aleph, I asked my board to meet and talk and to give me some boundaries around Israel. Where do we stand, right? Where can I work around and not have to go to them every minute? And so the Principle 16, we have 18 principles, and I'll read this quickly. We are committed to living in and drawing inspiration from Israel, land of enduring history, seat of sacred narrative, and land of the Bible. We do so in mutual recognition of our cousins, the Palestinians, and each other's right to freedom, self-determination, justice, security, and peace. We are committed to skillful efforts that seek a peaceful way to share the land of Israel-Palestine among all peoples who cherish it and call it home. So this principle has been, a godsend, really. So, it roots us, right? It's a stake. This is where we as an organization stand. We have stood firmly, with this principle since 2018. It's nothing new. It hasn't changed, and it's enduring, right? So it really has helped, and we are never going to be the first person to make a statement, right? We will only make a statement when it's relevant and meaningful for us. We've done some special programming around it. We have community and members, students in Israel. So it's it's a really difficult time. I will say that we are a little bit sheltered from what's going on, and what I mean by that is 75% of our income is earned. And so we aren't dependent on foundation funding to the extent that some people might, right, in terms of making a position or statement that that isn't one that everyone agrees with. And at the same time, we are Zionists, right? So we call ourselves Zionists with a little z, which some people have asked me what does that mean, right? And if you want to talk about it offline, we can. But so we're Zionists with a little z. And we also, believe in Israel's right to protect itself. And as I read in our Principle 16, we're cousins, right, with the Palestinians. So it's working, right? And I think it's enough I think we, again, have enough room in who we are in our cultural fabric to hold multiple perspectives at the same time, and to, give and take and trust. So we're doing okay as far as this issue is concerned.
Yeah, that was a profoundly beautifully written principle. And I think if that exemplifies just one of the 18, I think I'd love to have the full deck because I can only imagine.
Yeah.
But I also think that this speaks to what renewal is the holding the both and acknowledging that we all hold multiple identities and multiple thoughts and all of that, and we can channel it into our Judaism in a way that makes it fuller. I think that was so beautiful. You as a person are an incredible leader beyond what you are doing at Aleph and running the organization. Your voice is very prominent in the Jewish community around advocacy, feminist spaces, spaces for Jews of color. Can you tell us a little bit more about that aspect of your leadership?
So I, don't take for granted anything. And what I mean by that, so like there's always this voice in the back of my head about how much my parents sacrificed. So they, as I mentioned, they died and they both passed away within 6 months of each other in 2007. And I don't take for granted like every sacrifice my mother in particular made for me, right? And I grew up in a very traditional patriarchal household. I mean, like I like the fact that I went to women's college, that my daughter is a women's college was preordained, right? Because I was in a household where actually, I mean, it was frozen in time. So my parents had left Korea, I had left Korea. Korea changed. My parents' perception of what Korea was and is never changed, right? So they're frozen, right, in time. In a society where a family setting where women and children ate separately in a separate room. The men ate first. We ate in the kitchen. I was taught to walk backwards out of a room full of men, having important conversations. I wasn't allowed to, ask questions that didn't work out very well. I make up reasons to enter that room whenever I could. And just this, sacrifice, right? And so I feel an obligation just in my core to make a difference, to do something with what I've been given and the privileges that that have been afforded to me, right? Same with as a Jew of color. When I started in 2010, trying to find a position at my level, so many closed doors, so many questions, right? So much hostility and fear. So I serve on the board of EDOT, the Midwest Collaborative, which Shahana runs. I'm on the board of Mitsui, which is Yoshi Silverstein. I'm back on the advisory board of Lunar, the Asian American Collective. I just have been named this past fall to the leadership team of the Jewish Social Justice Roundtable. When I'm asked, I do, right? I think that there's just so few of us in positions of leadership as Jews of color, as women of color, that I do what I can to strengthen and support my brothers and sisters, not just women, but I guess I'm a staunch feminist, through and through. And there's an obligation. So this is interesting. One of the things that I've been working with Aleph in particular, right? So when I joined is, here's this amazing spiritual transformative organization. It's not enough to work on ourselves. It's necessary, absolutely, right? It's the in-breath, the out-breath, the inhalation, the exhalation. But we must take our gifts, our talents, and do something with it, right? And take action.
So beautiful. Oh my God, we could just like dwell in that space for a really long time. You just alluded obviously to some of the challenges that you face personally. Are there challenges that Aleph faces as well, or that Renewal Judaism is facing?
It's interesting thinking about this. I guess in some ways it's not just so dissimilar from what I experienced. I'll start with myself first. I feel like as in particular, so my experience as a woman of color and as an East Asian, sort of falling into that model minority stereotype and myth. It's myth, right? Because Asians aren't a monolith. We're not all the same. We're not all successful, and we're not all doctors and lawyers. And I feel like there's a high bar, right? A high standard set for achievement, and I do this to myself too. It's ingrained. And then there's a equally high bar where, in terms of a floor for failure. So there's a tight and narrow space I feel like that I maneuver in all the time. And I can't tell you, just, I'm not talking about Aleph, but I'm talking just in general. Bad behavior by men sorry, all you men out there, but bad behavior by men in high positions that are overlooked. So I'm not going to get political right now, but I am getting a little political. But bad behavior, right? Like criminal behavior that would never be tolerated. And I think, like, about the 3 women who were, eviscerated, whose careers as college presidents, right? Who are held to a different standard just because they're women and women of color. Also, like, it breaks my heart that there's so little room, right? And so what are we teaching? What example are we showing for people who want to take that risk, right? And it's like, okay, take that risk and then you're on your own. I mean, so that there's, like, where's the support? Like, you want women of color to lead, but you don't want to listen to them. You don't want to hear what they have to say. It's really, really hard. And the similarity, I guess, with Olive is I feel like Olive is, again, like the best kept secret. It almost feels like this sort of, forgotten stepchild of Judaism feeling, right? That they're not appreciated or not understood. We've never been funded by mainstream Jewish funders. If any mainstream Jewish funders want to fund us, please do out there, right? I mean, it's just because we don't, it's hard to understand what we do and how we do it. It's different, right? And we ask, it's about co-creation. So there's a price you pay to be part of us. Most people that come over stay and are like are I mean they're lifers, right? They're lifers. Yeah, it's hard.
I think probably in both instances, like it's right, it's hard for people to get behind something they don't understand or something that's new. And it's not until that it's no longer new or it's established that then they're like, oh, I get it now, right? But this is what visionary work is, and this is why we love supporting all of you, our jewels, because you are imagining things that we don't even know yet to imagine, and seeing, well, that's not quite right. We can do it better, and here's how. So thank you for all that you're doing. What would success or more success look like for you for Renewal Judaism, like over the next 5 years or over the next decade?
Okay, so for renewal, I've been thinking about, like a lot of times, people will say, oh, in terms of like, nonprofits, like we want to write ourselves out of business, right? Like, so we don't want to write ourselves out of business. I don't think that's what, I don't know if my board is listening to me. So we don't want to write ourselves out of business. And we also recognize that we can't, that we don't want ever to be the same, right? So I guess, along those lines, so 5-10 years from now, Olive won't look anything like it does today, right? And maybe, I mean, and that even also goes to the seminary, right? I mean, so if we are true to those priorities, right? Experimentation, right? Transitioning our leadership over to the next generation, right? So handing it over means hands open, handing it over, relinquishing, letting go. So, letting it happen, right? So having the trust, having the courage to reimagine something that we can't even think or know what it'll be like 5-10 years from now. So that's for Aleph. For me, in terms of where I sit, I really am somebody who's always believed in holiness, and holiness with the WHOLI, so not just holy, in terms of divinity, divine intervention, spirits, being the divine creation ourselves, but holiness being the capacity to be our best selves at any given moment, and being able to lean into and share fully who we are, and not being different people, when you're on a Zoom presentation than you are at home. Again, being the same people, the same person that you are on the street as you are behind closed doors. So that level of safety and security, right, for everybody to be fully present and involved and engaged and loved for who we are today. For fun, I take classes at night. So I'm taking a class on anti-Semitism right now. And the guest speaker was Kohenet April Baskin, right? Who's a wonderful leader and Jew of color herself. And she was talking about intergenerational trauma and about how to empty ourselves of that trauma or whatever. And I started to think, number one, oh my God, you're so renewal, you didn't know it, right? So that's number one. Number two, I've been playing with this idea that, so a lot of what we are able to hear and hold and feel, it may be blocked. So this is going to sound a little renewal, but this is, so stay with me, but is blocked by this, trauma, negative energy, that we don't have the capacity to feel or hold things that are new or may be counter to what we already think and feel, because we're filled up with other stuff, right? So what can we do to empty, right, and to release those things so that we can allow for more room to be fully ourselves and to hear and feel and open. And so, so like I'm sort of playing with this idea, like, that, even my own self, like, you need to constantly take in, take out. I mean, again, it goes back to that same inhalation, exhalation, breathing in, breathing out, like, and that you need room capacity, and you can build that capacity in your lungs, right? It's not just your chest, but your diaphragm, your whole body. We can take in more oxygen and energy than we ever knew possible, and you can build that muscle. You can actually release and exhale and remove more than we ever could imagine, right? And so, I think there's something there, to play with about how can we then align, right? So this alignment so when there's a teaching that Rabbi Jeff Roth, who's on our board, and who I actually knew when I did a Jewish mindfulness teacher training with him, even before I knew renewal existed, right? So I found renewal on the internet, and I didn't know it existed before I took this job. Anyways, I digress. But he believes, and it makes sense to me, that when we fell out of Eden, that there was a disconnect, a disjoint between the heaven and the earth, right? And so that disjoint also happens in us, right? So that our connection, our alignment, is a little off kilter. And so we can realign ourselves in the image of the divinity, the divine beings that we are, to really fully channel the power and energy of our own creative force, right? And we can channel that power and energy within each one of us for the greater good, right? So I'm also started to read Shai Held's book on love and Judaism. Sorry, I don't know the name of your book. I just got it. But about Judaism not just being about action, which is actually the way that I came into it and fell in love with it. A lot of it was because it's not just about what you believe, it's what you do. And I'm starting to understand and take in. It isn't an either or. It isn't just about doing, but it's also about loving, right? And we start with loving ourselves, right? Loving ourselves, because if we can't love ourselves, you can't love other people. Loving Judaism openly, loudly, right? Not being tight and holding in that fear of being ostracized, the fear of being othered, right? So I think there's incredible potential for everybody, right? So love and action, both and.
Oh my gosh. I mean, so beautiful. I mean, ultimately, it's about being our best selves, right? Being our best self. And what I'm struck by what you're saying, both about your hopes for renewal Judaism and about yourself, is it's about this constant evolution, right? It's a little like what Michelle Obama says. It's about the becoming, right? It's not about the arriving. It's about the and with the doing and the love. I mean, I can't think of a better way.
We're becoming every single moment. The other thing I'll add is, so when I was running the Illinois Caucus for Adolescent Health, it was focused on adolescents. And I was always struck by, sexuality is a continuum. We're sexual beings from birth to death. Same with our spirituality. We are spiritual beings from birth till death. And what would it look like or feel like to build those building blocks and have, discussions, conversations about the soul be ordinary, commonplace, and integrated, right? So, I mean, that's part of, I guess, what I would hope would happen a little bit, is that cultural shift, that spirituality, so not, Christian fundamentalism, right? Or Islamist fundamentalism, right? So just spirituality in whatever way or direction or shape you want to take it. It happens to be Jewish for me, right? And have that be part and parcel, right, of everyday life.
Yeah, I think it is so core to Judaism and our Jewish values, this continual self-reflection and inquisition and improvement that I think for many of us who are Jews, it is a North Star, and it is something that we do, and we do it at Yom Kippur, and we do it at Rosh Hashanah, but it's not the way that most people probably move through this world. And so how do we expand that? How do we share it? How do we share it?
Yeah.
We're coming to the end of our time. I'm going to encourage anyone who has a question to put it in the chat, but I sort of want to end us with your experience as being part of the collective and this network of other women, and what that's been like for you. How has it impacted your leadership, and also how have you leveraged relationships through the collective?
So, I mean, it goes without saying that I believe in the power of women, right, and sisterhood. So I was thinking about what Illuminate does. So we're gonna try this out, okay? And you're free to use it if you want to.
Oh, thank you.
Illuminate nurtures and normalizes strong Jewish women in leadership. They focus on social entrepreneurship. So there are women in the collective who are not necessarily running Jewish organizations, but their Judaism is part of who they are and why they do what they do, right? And so, so there's a freedom there a little bit to, to be Jewish in the way that you want, and it doesn't. It's not lost on me, and I'm very excited and proud that actually I'm speaking at a time where we're in Women's History Month, right? So this is all about celebrating women right now in April, and again, so it's about. I have met women that I never would have met ever, and I'm in lots of different circles. Never would have met them all across the world. I reached out when I was in Israel a month ago. I reached out and met with one of our collective members from a different cohort. I am a firm believer in the power of relationships, right? And so I don't know. I'm still in the collective, right? And so I'm looking forward to many, many years where, and I do some of that already, but even more so, reaching out, calling in, supporting, helping, co-creating. If any, so like for me in particular, one of the things that Aleph does, which I failed to remember, is that we partner. So we have different ways to partner with us. Project directors is one of them, but also on events, if you do a class or a workshop, either for our whole community or for a specific community. Again, it's DIY, D whatever it's called, but together, right? And so because renewal is everything, right? At the same time, there's no limit to what we could do together or to explore or play with and experiment. Yeah.
SooJi, your positivity is infectious, and sitting in conversation with you is a spiritual experience in and of itself. And I hope that all of our listeners share that today. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your work and your leadership with us. We're just so proud to be supporting you. I'm going to invite Rachel Siegel back on to join us.
And I'm going to put in the chat. So as I said, there's the best way to experience renewal is experience it right in person. So we are in the spirit of co-hosting partnership. We are doing a renewal Shavuot at Israel Friedman. I think many people on the call are in that Northeast. I happen to be in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I will be there June 11th through June 14th. Renewal Shavuot like you've never experienced ever. So it's going to knock your socks off. I hope you'll join us. I will be there. And again, it's the best way to do renewal is to do it.
Wow. Thank you so much, SooJi. I want to echo Rachel's thank you, and just to say that it really has been such an honor getting to know you and having you in the collective. We really appreciate your taking the time to share your wisdom, your story, renewal Judaism story with us. And thank you, Rachel, as always, for leading us through this beautiful conversation. We hope that you will visit Aleph's website to learn more about their ongoing work. And like SooJi said, please experience it yourself. We also hope that you will sign up for Illuminate's newsletter to hear about events and updates such as this one. Join us for our next Crown Jewel conversation on Thursday, May 2nd at 12 o'clock Eastern with Leela Klein, the co-executive director of Co-op Dayton. And register now for Illuminate's annual luncheon on Tuesday, May 7th in New York City. We'll put the links in the chat for these events. We offer these sessions at no cost to you. As a nonprofit committed to women's advancement, we count on generous donors to power our network and ask that you consider supporting Illuminate and our work to advance Jewish women leaders. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you soon.